Well, again, welcome everyone. We've had questions lately about things that have been predicted to occur in our future. I'm not talking about Bible prophecy, but rather predictions made by people who claim to have been given special knowledge that others do not have. We might call this prophecy as well. This special knowledge is often claimed to have come directly from God to the individual, sometimes by direct revelation, sometimes by way of dreams or visions. Other times this knowledge might be based on the Bible, but might rely on assumptions that might be difficult to prove. Should we ignore these predictions of our future from those who claim they have special knowledge of what will happen? Will we suffer physical or financial losses if we don't pay attention to them, or perhaps worse? Or might we suffer a loss of some kind if we do heed their warnings? Well, I'll be specifically addressing two predictions or prophecies today. These are things that we've been asked about. The first is the coming 3 days of darkness. I hear a lot about that these days. Second, a government-mandated worldwide day of Sunday rest and worship, known as the Sunday Law. Now, we've likely heard of these two prophecies, or maybe not. And of course, there are many, many more predictions that people have made and continue to make. How are we to decide which of these predictions to pay attention to and which ones we can safely ignore? Well, today, let's take a look at these two prophecies and perhaps a few others if we have time. And let's see if we might gain a better understanding of these extra biblical prophecies. So let's begin today with the predicted 3 days of darkness. Now, I did a search on the internet for these 3 days of darkness, and I gave up trying to count all the ones I ran across. They were everywhere. It seems to be a very popular topic these days, the 3 days of darkness. Now, this morning I tried it again, and my very first search, the first thing that came up on YouTube anyway, revealed a prophecy from a man with the title of doctor who claims that this day of darkness will occur sometime in the month of January in the year 2025. You might check it out yourself. It's the first thing I came up with. But anyway, if he's correct, then we will see 3 days of darkness beginning in less than 3 weeks. But where did this prophecy originate? Well, it appears to be associated with the Catholic Church, although it's not an official doctrine of theirs. Now, from the website, catholic.com/magazine/online edition/will there be 3 days of darkness? Quote, in certain Catholic prophetic circles, there's a concept known as the 3 days of darkness, according to which a judgment will come upon the earth, and the earth will be preternaturally shrouded in darkness. One of the most famous quotations about this event is attributed to the Italian mystic B.L. Anna Maria Taggi. In case you're wondering about the abbreviated title B.L., it means blessed. This title is used for those who are not yet saints, but who have been beatified by the Roman Catholic Church. So what did the beatified Anna Taggi allegedly have to say? Back to the article. She is said to have stated, there shall come over the whole earth an intense darkness, lasting 3 days and 3 nights. Nothing can be seen, and the air will be laden with pestilence, which will claim mainly, but not only, the enemies of religion. It will be impossible to use any man-made lighting during this darkness, except blessed candles. He who out of curiosity opens his window to look out or leaves his home will fall dead on the spot. During these 3 days, people should remain in their homes, pray the rosary, and beg God for mercy. All the enemies of the church, whether known or unknown, will perish over the whole earth during that universal darkness, with the exception of a few whom God will soon convert. The air shall be infected by demons who will appear under all sorts of hideous forms. Now, another mystic, not the word mystic, Marie Julie Jaheny, I'm still quoting by the way, is said to have claimed that only 100% wax candles will work. This has led people to selling pure beeswax candles to Catholic households for use during the event. Well, that's very interesting. Let's continue with this article written by this researcher. Here's what he says. He says, although I may perform more research in the future, thus far I have not been able to verify any reference to the 3 days of darkness in an approved apparition. Instead, I have found a highly problematic set of quotations and attributions that appear to be the product of the apparition rumor net rather than competent scholarship. As vivid and compelling as the prediction of the 3 days of darkness is, I would not recommend that Catholics be terrified of it or that they invest it with credence given the present state of the evidence. So based on alleged visions, we're said to be expecting 3 days and nights of darkness, although I suppose the nighttime would be dark anyway, in all forms of lighting. That's including our normal electrical lighting, flashlights, lights on our cell phones, or any other type of light will simply cease to work during these 3 days of darkness. Now, candles will work, but only if they're blessed candles made of beeswax. Anyone who looks out of a window will instantly die. Anyone who steps foot outside their home will instantly die. All enemies of the church will perish or die, presumably whether they are inside or outside. And demons will manifest themselves in the air, although I suppose if we're inside and don't look out a window, we won't see them. And if we do look out a window, we'll instantly die and we still wouldn't see them. Now, one question I had is, what if we're outside when the darkness begins? Will we be okay till we make it inside? Or will all those outside, being exposed to those demons, die the same way as those who look or walk out of their dwellings? Well, I don't know. But there are many, many people predicting these 3 days of darkness coming very soon. The two people we just read about are known as mystics. Now, a mystic practices mysticism. Turn to Revelation chapter 21 with me, if you would. That's Revelation chapter 21. Revelation chapter 21 and verse 8. And while we're turning, from the website Britannica.com/topic/mysticism, quote, mysticism, the practice of religious experiences during alternate states of consciousness, together with whatever ideologies, ethics, rites, myths, legends, and magic may be related to them. Religious experiences during alternate states of consciousness. Can what might be perceived as a religious experience during an altered state of consciousness be trusted? Can we trust myth and legends to provide us with truth? Now, magic is something our Bibles do speak about. They actually speak against it. But again, Revelation chapter 21, verse 8 tells us, but the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Notice that sorcerers, among others, will suffer their second death. The word sorcerer here is the Greek word pharmakous, and that can be a spell-giving potion, or by extension, a magician. Now, while many Bibles translate this Greek word as sorcery, other Bibles do translate this word directly as magic. But do we really want to get our information from those who practice the magic arts, or from myths or legends, or from someone who is experiencing an altered state of consciousness? You know, for those who claim to have special knowledge revealed to them, I can really only think of 4 ways this can happen. We'll take a look at these. Now, the first is that the person having the dream or vision is simply misinterpreting a dream, or what might appear to them to be a vision. I think we've all had random dreams that maybe some of them have frightened us. But most often our dreams do not foretell of actual future events. Yet I can see someone believing that they've dreamed of the future and it seems very real to them. So I can understand that. They may have a dream, but it may not be prophetic, but they may think it is. Well, second, there are some that might actually profit from claiming that they have sensational news about our future. Predictions that get our attention. They make up a compelling story and publish it on social media, maybe YouTube, or even in a church setting. Turn to 2 Peter, if you would. That's 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. I think I go there often, but 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 1. Now, unfortunately, there are people who deliberately make up false stories to give them fame and to generate money for themselves. They prey on the people's trust to get them what they want. And unfortunately, this works. Again, 2 Peter 2, verse 1, I'll be reading this from the Good News translation. It says, "False prophets appeared in the past among the people, and in the same way, false teachers will appear among you. They will bring in destructive, untrue doctrines, and will deny the Master who redeemed them, and so they will bring upon themselves sudden destruction. Even so, many will follow their immoral ways, and because of what they do, others will speak evil of the way of truth. In their greed, these false teachers will make a profit out of telling you made-up stories. For a long time now, their judge has been ready, and their destroyer has been wide awake." I don't want to be one of them. And of course, let's not forget Matthew 7, verse 15, which tells us, "Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." Our Bibles tell us that we will have false teachers that will use us to make money for themselves. They'll do so by making up stories or prophecies, if you will. They get our attention and then draw us away from the truth and the actual prophecies from God that are found in our Holy Bibles. Now, the third possibility we're talking of here is that those prophesying were sincere, but they were deceived by Satan. We know that Satan deceives the whole world. And a person might genuinely believe that they heard from God, when in fact, it could have been a satanic message. And so they might be sincere in what they believe, but sincerely wrong. Before we get to the fourth one, I'd like to say that the 3 days of darkness are said to occur at any time now. As I said, there's a current prediction they'll occur this month. But many have already unsuccessfully predicted previous dates when the 3 days of darkness will begin. And those days passed and nothing happened. In fact, I'd like to look at a second reference concerning the 3 days of darkness. This time I'd like to quote from Wikipedia. Quote, "In Roman Catholicism, the 3 days of darkness is an eschatological concept believed by some Catholics to be a true prophecy of future events. The prophecy foretells 3 days and nights of an intense darkness over the whole earth, against which the only light will come from blessed beeswax candles, and during which all the enemies of the church will perish." The prophecy parallels one of the 10 plagues against Egypt in the book of Exodus. That's Exodus 10, verses 21 through 29. However, the specifics of the 3 days of darkness prophecy, such as the miraculous beeswax candles, are derived from private revelation. End quote. Private revelation, meaning it's not found in our Bibles, is coming from a specific individual. Now, the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness is said to parallel one of the 10 plagues against Egypt in the book of Exodus. Well, the question is, does it? Let's take a look. Exodus chapter 10. Let's go over there. If you would, Exodus chapter 10, we'll begin in verse 21. That's Exodus chapter 10, verse 21. For the 3 days of darkness found in this chapter. Now, I would mention that there are sometimes multiple fulfillments of prophecy in our Bibles, and that's true. But for now, let's take a look at the 3 days of darkness found beginning in Exodus 10, verse 21. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt." And Moses stretched forth his hand toward heaven, and there was a thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. Now here we see 3 days of darkness. But this darkness did not affect God's people, the Israelites. They continued to have light. They did not need blessed beeswax candles during the day. It was just the Egyptians that had darkness. Let's see this in verse 23. They, that's the Egyptians, saw not one another. I guess it was that dark. Neither rose any from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings. So unlike what we're being told will happen in the future, in the original account of the 3 days of darkness in Exodus, God's people did not experience the darkness. God's people were not required to light special candles of beeswax. No mention of the rosary was made. No one who looked out their window was said to have died, nor did all the enemies of religion die that day. The prophesied coming 3 days of darkness really doesn't parallel the original 3 days of darkness in Egypt very well, I'd say. But turn to Revelation 16, if you would. That's Revelation chapter 16 and verse 10. Revelation chapter 16, verse 10. Now, is there a prophecy in our Bibles that does foretell of darkness in our future? And if so, could this account for the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness? You know, some see a replay, a second occurrence of the 10 plagues of Exodus in Revelation chapter 16. Let's take a look at verse 10, Revelation 16:10. And the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, and his kingdom was full of darkness. They gnawed their tongues for pain. So here we do see a time of darkness coming in our future. Will it be for 3 days and 3 nights? Will it extend beyond the kingdom of the beast? Well, the Bible doesn't say. But this is, we might notice, this is the 5th vial of the wrath of God to be poured out. Now, this occurs after the first vial, where sores come upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and after the second vial, when every living thing in the sea dies. It's after rivers turn to blood, and after men are scorched with fire. Now, according to the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness, it could occur any day without warning. But that's not what Bible prophecy tells us about a time of darkness coming in our future. Now, the Great Tribulation would have begun long before we see this darkness prophesied in our Bibles. Now, this time of darkness spoken of, this time of darkness spoken of in our Bibles, it will not sneak up on us and occur suddenly without warning, as the prophecy of the coming 3 nights of darkness often states. Actually, the only evidence we have for this coming 3 days of darkness is that of the mystics. Did this originate from a random dream that was interpreted to be from God but wasn't? Could these mystics have been influenced by Satan and mistakenly believed it came from God? I'm not sure, but as we discussed before, Satan does often counterfeit things of God. He takes a little truth and mixes in lies and deception to distract us or move us away from the true God and his true prophecy that tells us what will happen in the future. Now, there's one last option I have yet to mention. And the fourth option here is that the 3 days of darkness indeed came from God. But the characteristics of the coming 3 days and nights of darkness contradict the plan of God as revealed in His Holy Bible. They don't match. And we can't really believe in this prophecy of the three nights, darkness of 3 nights, and at the same time believe in the prophecy of our Bibles, which come from God. They just don't match. So as usual, I'm going to tell you that I'm with Peter and the other apostles as they answered the high priest of their day, In Acts 5:29, then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. I'd like to add that to obey God rather than men, we need to believe God rather than men or women. Let's go ahead and look at something else. Let's look at our prophesied coming Sunday law. That's another popular prophecy we find on social media these days, and we were asked about it last week even. Well, I had no idea about the origin of this one. I had to research this from scratch for today's message. And to be honest, I was a bit surprised by what I found. Now, the prophecy here is that, again, one day soon, the entire world will be required to worship and rest on Sunday, the first day of the week. This is called the Sunday law. Governments all around the world, or perhaps a single worldwide government, will enforce Sunday as a day of worship and rest. Reminds me of Constantine. Now, while the coming 3 days of darkness appear to be associated with Catholicism, the coming Sunday law seems to have originated with the Seventh-day Adventist, or SDA for short. Keep in mind that the Seventh-day Adventists worship and rest on Saturday, or more accurately, the seventh-day Sabbath, and not on Sunday. I would think most Christians are not likely to be too upset if they're forced to worship and rest on Sunday. After all, most Christians are already doing that. At least I think they are. But for the Seventh-day Adventists and other Sabbath-keeping groups, this would be a real problem. Now, some even suggest that this Sunday law could be the mark of the beast. I'd like to read an article entitled Sunday Laws and Bible Prophecy, written by John Pullian. Quote, though an issue that seems to be on the minds of more SDAs, that's a Seventh-day Adventist, outside the Western world than any other is the concept of future Sunday laws, particularly in the United States. This may come as a surprise to people in the West, who are well aware that Sunday laws are not on the radar in Western public conversation right now. But for many Seventh-day Adventists in the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia, the concept of Sunday laws is a real and imminent threat of critical importance. The narrative goes something like this. Now, here's where we get the idea of the worldwide Sunday law. Let's continue in the article. We're quoting here. Ellen White, special messenger to the SDA Church, clearly predicted, based on visions from the Lord, that before the end of time, the U.S. Congress will pass a national Sunday law, enforcing worship on Sunday by all Americans. Laws like this will then be adopted in Europe and ultimately by the entire world. Well, this time we have a vision, or perhaps a series of visions, from Ellen White. Now, she had interpreted these visions to mean that the world will be forced by law to keep Sunday as a holy day, and that would mean no work or play allowed on Sunday. First, the United States would pass such a law, then all other countries in the world would follow. Now, while Ellen White may have had visions about this coming law, I suspect there was some good old human reasoning motivating this prophecy as well. Notice the rest of this quote. Let's continue. The special appeal of this idea is that it would be the single, clearest, and most measurable sign of the end believers in the second coming of Jesus have. The idea, note the word idea again here, the idea that the gospel will be preached in the whole world as a witness to all nations is clear, but would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to verify. Now, Ellen White was looking for some sign that would conclusively prove the imminent return of Jesus Christ. Let me continue. The idea that famines, earthquakes, and pestilences will increase before the end still leaves open the issue of how bad these events have to be in order to qualify as apocalyptic. How massive and frequent are the earthquakes to come? How severe the pestilences? Determining that the end is at hand on the grounds of any particular earthquake, famine, or pestilence has proven to be a fool's errand through the centuries. Now, I won't argue with that. People have falsely predicted the return of Christ many times based on these criteria, but we've always had these things with us. Based solely on Matthew 24, for example, there is no way to determine exactly when the things Christ spoke of there get to the point where declaring the time of the end is warranted. Well, let's continue. But in contrast to these other signs, a specific law in the halls of Congress of the United States of America, that is a specific, measurable sign of the end. Well, that might sound nice, but this is really only an idea as we just read. This was not exactly prophesied by Jesus Christ or any other prophets in our Bibles. But even if the U.S. Congress did pass a law that everyone was to worship on Sunday, the first day of the week, that still, in my opinion, doesn't guarantee the gospel will have been preached to the world. It just means a law has been passed. Let's continue. When such a law is being debated in Congress and seems likely to pass, we can all know that the end is at hand. This concept is clear, simple, and very attractive for people who would like to know how and when things will end up. It gives them something unique to look for in the news cycle. It feels good to have inside knowledge in a matter of such importance. End quote. So this coming Sunday law gives us something unique to look for in the news cycle. It makes us feel good to have inside knowledge of a matter of such importance. Now, to me, this sounds a little bit like tickling the ears. Let's go ahead and turn to 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 3. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. 2 Timothy 4:3. People are always searching for knowledge, and particularly knowledge about what will happen in the future. And often, they'll blindly believe others who claim to have this special knowledge. But can we just blindly trust those who tell us they alone have been given special knowledge by some means unavailable to the rest of us? Again, 2 Timothy 4, verse 3. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust or their desires to know, shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. They shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned to fables. International Standard Version reads, For the time will come when people will not tolerate healthy doctrine, but with itching ears will surround themselves with teachers who cater to their people's own desires. They will refuse to listen to the truth and will turn to myths. Now, if this is not from God, then I'd say it's a myth. Is this coming Sunday law from God? Will there be a worldwide law that everyone will worship on Sunday? Well, I can't find it in the Bible anywhere. It appears that this prophecy is based in its entirety on a vision Ellen White claimed to receive from God. Again, quote, clearly predicted based on the visions from the Lord. Is Ellen White a prophet of God, as I think many believe her to be? Let me read from an article located at thethinkingcup.com. This article is titled, The Sunday Law Crisis and New Predictions. This is something I knew nothing about, so you may be surprised to see this. Remember, Ellen White's looking for Congress to pass a law declaring a Sunday law, basically. Quote, in 1888, note the time period here, in 1888, during a period of intense debate in the United States about a national Sunday law, Mrs. White once again predicted that Christ's return would occur within the lifetime of the current generation. She wrote, The hour will come, it is not far distant, And some of us who now believe, she's talking about some of the believers alive in her day here, some of us who now believe will be alive upon the earth and shall see the prediction verified, and hear the voice of the archangel, and the trump of God echo from mountain and plain and sea to the uttermost parts of the earth. From the Review and Herald, July 31, 1888. He goes on. It has been 136 years since Ellen White wrote this, and every person she addressed as some of us has long since passed away. In other words, her prediction turned out to be false. The next year, she made similar statements. Quote, "The resurrection is not far in the future. Some of us will doubtless be living when the voice that is heard everywhere, even to ocean depths and the sunless caverns of earth, shall be heard, echoing from sea to sea, from valleys and from mountains, calling to life the sleeping dead." Obviously, she's speaking of the resurrections here. Continuing. "Just before us is a time of trouble such as never was, and those who are weaving the principles of truth into their practical life will soon understand what the wrath of the dragon means. Every soul who loves God will be tested in regard to his sacred law. We are living in the last days, and the generation that is to witness the final destruction has not been left without warning of the hasting judgments of God." Mrs. White affirmed that her generation had been warned and would witness the final destruction. That generation has long since perished, and none of them saw the final destruction. In 1892, she wrote, "Something great and decisive is to take place, and that right early. If any delay, the character of God and his throne will be compromised." I'll read that again. She says, "If any delay, the character of God and his throne will be compromised." The author continues, "Since it has been 132 years since this was written, has God's character been compromised?" End quote. Now, back around the year 1888, there was talk about a national Sunday law. In fact, this was proposed in Congress in 1888. Ellen White believed that this law would be passed, and soon, obviously in the lifetimes of the people that were alive back then. Now, I didn't know anything about this, but let me quote an article from diggingfortruth.org. You can check this out, do your own research, but this article is titled, "Sunday Law Proposed by Senator Blair, May 21st, 1888. Quote, "The United States almost had a national Sunday law. One was proposed in the U.S. Senate on May 21st, 1888. This is what was proposed. The bill proposed by Senator Blair, and upon which the argument was made, is as follows. 50th Congress, Senate Bill 2983, first session. In the Senate of the United States, May 21st, 1888, Mr. Blair introduced the following bill, which was read twice and referred to the Committee on Education and Labor. A bill to secure to the people the enjoyment of the first day of the week, commonly known as the Lord's Day, as a day of rest, and to promote its observation, as a day of religious worship. Being enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that no person or corporation or the agent, servant, or employee of any person or corporation shall perform or authorize to be performed any secular work, labor, or business to the disturbance of others, works of necessity, mercy, and humanity excepted. Nor shall any person engage in any play, game, or amusement, or recreation to the disturbance of others on the first day of the week, commonly known as the Lord's Day, or during any part thereof, in any territory, district, vessel, or place subject to the exclusive jurisdiction of the United States. Nor shall it be lawful for any person or corporation to receive pay for labor or service performed or rendered in violation of this section. Now, this goes on. I want to check it out for yourself. That's something I had no idea about. Didn't know that. But I believe there, friends, is our Sunday law. The one that was being debated when Ellen White prophesied about the coming Sunday law. But it didn't pass. Now, I'm speculating here, but I suspect that Ellen White believed this law would pass and that it might be a sign of the end times. That's based on her understanding and her logic at the time. Now, other than Ellen White's failed prophecy from over 100 years ago, is there any evidence to support a worldwide Sunday law now? Some of us might speculate about the beast coming in the future, making a Sunday law of some kind. I believe that's still probably speculation. You know, Christianity is waning today. In fact, we see Christians being belittled, made fun of, and persecuted. Muslims and other non-Christian religions will likely never go for a law that forced Sunday worship on them. Can we imagine passing a Sunday law in Iran? Even with a one-world government, I doubt it could be enforced in a country like Iran. I suspect that Ellen White believed that the Sunday law that was being considered in her day was a sign of Christ's return. Although I'm doubtful that passing such a law would guarantee that the world would have heard the gospel and Christ would return immediately, or at least during the lifetimes of some of those who lived in the day of Ellen White's prediction. Anyway, these are just two examples of prophecies that many are still promoting today, even though both of these prophecies were predicted to occur in the past, but failed. They just keep getting repeated as if there's something new today. But these certainly aren't the only two. I'll give you a couple others. Jean Dixon predicted a planetary alignment on the 4th of February, 1962. And she prophesied that this would bring worldwide destruction. Well, it didn't. That didn't stop a man from suggesting a planetary alignment last year would cause worldwide destruction. He related this to last year's total eclipse of the sun. But again, nothing happened. But did that stop people from believing this false prophet? No. Some were even afraid to step foot out of their homes that day. Sort of reminds me of the 3 days of darkness prophecy, doesn't it? Harold Camping and Ronald Wineland are just two examples of those who predicted the return of Jesus Christ in the past, multiple times. But of course they failed, multiple times. But, so what if we believe them and they turned out to be wrong? So what? Well, many of their followers were urged to donate extra money, even mortgage their homes to give money to the church so they could warn the people. What happened when Christ did not return as they had prophesied? Well, a good number of people ended up a lot poorer and many in debt. In debt from second mortgages on their homes and other loans they never expected to pay back if Christ had returned as prophesied. It can be even worse. In March of 1997, Marshall Applewhite of the now infamous group Heaven's Gate predicted that the comet Hale-Bopp was more than just a comet. If his followers would commit suicide as the comet approached, their souls will reach a higher level. They'd be taken somewhere anyway. All of his followers committed suicide. They believed the words of a false prophet rather than their Bibles. Now, how many of us are familiar with the phrase, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid"? Do we know the origin of that phrase? Our younger viewers may not. Let me tell you where that came from. Jim Jones, founder of the People's Temple Church in Indianapolis, Indiana, said he had visions that a nuclear holocaust would take place back in 1967. But after that failed, his followers continued to follow him anyway, no matter what he said. Eventually, he was responsible for the deaths of over 900 of his followers in what is known today as the Jonestown Massacre. This was the single largest loss of U.S. civilian lives in a non-natural disaster until 9/11. Members of this church followed Jones to a paradise he promised them in the jungles of Guyana. To make a long story short, accounts of people, including children, who wanted to leave but were not allowed to, surfaced. Leo Ryan, who represented California's 11th Congressional District, decided to make a trip to Guyana to check things out. Ryan was killed when he tried to leave. Others there were told to drink a mixture of grape flavor aid, laced with cyanide and some other ingredients. There was allegedly some talk about reincarnation, which may have contributed to little opposition to drinking the poison. But nonetheless, armed guards ensured that the people would drink the flavor aid that would kill them. They were going to die one way or another. Although the people actually died from drinking poisoned flavor aid, people have used a more popular Kool-Aid, a similar product, when they spoke of it. So the phrase, "don't drink the Kool-Aid," means not to follow these false prophets and teachers to our own destruction. But sadly, people still do, even today, despite the harsh lessons of the past. Let's turn over, as we get toward the end here, to Jeremiah chapter 23. That's Jeremiah chapter 23. Over to verse 25. That's Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 25. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking. I'm aware that our Bibles tell us that in the end times, your young men shall see visions and your old men shall dream dreams. But that doesn't mean that everyone claiming to have a dream or a vision is of God, as we've seen. Again, Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 25. I have heard what the prophets said, that prophesy lies in my name, saying, I have dreamed, I have dreamed. How long shall this be in the heart of the prophets that prophesy lies? Yes, they are prophets of the deceit of their own heart. Now, if we get the chance, we should probably read this whole chapter. But for now, drop down to verse 32, if you would. Verse 32. Behold, I am against them that prophesy false dreams, says the Lord, and do tell them, and cause my people to err by their lies and by their lightness. Yet I sent them not, nor commanded them. Therefore they shall not profit this people at all, says the Lord. So Bible prophecy prophesies there will be those who prophesy falsely. I got that out. That's pretty good. Okay. All right, let's conclude today, okay? We need to be very, very careful when anyone claims to have heard it directly from God or to have had a dream or vision. Both the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness and the Sunday laws have no real biblical support. Both were predicted to occur in the past. Neither did. Practically all of those claiming to hear from God in dreams and in visions have been wrong, at least modern day. Those who listen to them and are deceived by them often face disappointment, damage to their faith in God, financial loss, and even death as a result. Brethren, how can we avoid being deceived? Well, we need to prove everything from our Bibles. We say this all the time. We never want to just believe what anyone says. That includes what I say as well, of course. As always, we need to prove everything we hear, keeping what we find to be true and rejecting everything that's not. As I often quote 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 21, prove all things. Hold fast that which is good.